Yes. We want to play a story for you, not a music, a story. The story is called The Mask. A very interesting story, and I want to listen to it carefully. Put your tape on cap, tape it. Because, you know, we say stories are creative tools for life. For while they are fiction, they can convey profound truths. They are tales of truths. How many times has hearing a story given us an insight into something that has happened in our lives? How many times has the vivid memory of a story warned us away from a harmful action, inspired us towards a heroic one, guided us to an understanding, soothed our sadness, cooled our anger, and warmed our heart? So, with that intention, we're going to play this story for you. I want you to listen to the story keenly. It's a story coming out of India. And it's a tale. And we're not saying nothing about it. Just listen to the story. This is a Cutting Edge on RFM.
Once in the great kingdom of... there lived an emperor who had only one child, a daughter, and she was as smart as she was beautiful. She liked to sit in her father's court and watch all the people come and go to him, and she came to be known as wise and serene. However, when it came time for her to be married, she came to her father with a really outlandish request for those days when marriages were arranged and you really never saw your husband until the wedding day. To her father, she said, "I believe that you can tell a person's character by their face. I have seen so many people come to you, wise men, noble ambassadors, right down to villainous criminals. And it seems whatever is in their heart is reflected in their features. So I don't want to marry somebody I've never seen. I want to choose my husband by the depth of being I can see in his face." Well, father was shocked. This was unheard of. But finally he relented, and so a proclamation was sent right throughout the vast kingdom that any man was eligible to marry the princess and one day become emperor. Well, there was hardly a man under 50 who didn't think he had a good chance. Well, actually there was one man. He knew he didn't have a chance. He was a villainous, harsh, cruel-looking man. He was a thief and a cheat and a gambler, and his face was mean and crooked and scarred. But he was very sly and very quick-witted, and when he heard this proclamation, he hatched a clever plan. He saw through this he could rob the emperor blind. If he could just get to the finals of the competition, get inside the palace walls, and while all the fuss was going on, just slip away to the treasury, fill his pockets with enough gold for the rest of his life. There was just one problem: his face. So he went to a mask maker. In those days, mask making was a very high art in China. And he went to a great mask maker and he said, "I want you to make me the most beautiful, lifelike mask with all the noblest, finest qualities." The mask maker took one look at his ravaged, mean face, and his heart leapt at the thought of doing him up. So he put his whole heart and soul into this mask. And when the thief came back to collect it, he could hardly believe it. He held it in his hand. It was so lifelike and beautiful. He put it up over his own face, that awful face that caused people to run away in fear. And when he looked at himself in the mirror now, wow, what looked back at him was a face of dignity, honesty, generosity, kindness, love, all the things he hated. But behind that gentle smile and the beautiful mask, his own face creased into a crooked smile. Ha! This plan was going to work, he was sure, and it did. He got right through to the finals. He was amongst the last select few to be escorted to the very palace, through the streets of the city, in a great procession with bands and rose petals thrown and people cheering and waving. They made their way to the palace, wearing his beautiful, noble mask with its gentle smile. He lifted his shoulders. He really looked the part. But then the emperor, to honor these fine young men, sent out his bravest, most colorful, biggest warriors to escort them to the palace. So the thief suddenly found himself with on either side a burly warrior, smiling down at him, not leaving his side for an instant, not even when they were in the palace. He couldn't slip away, no chance at all. And then they all found themselves in the great hall, and the princess came in. Well, she spotted him in an instant, and she liked what she saw. She called out to her father, "That's him!" A cry went up in the room, but behind the mask, the thief gasped, "Oh, no, not me. I wanted to be rich, not married." What if she finds out this is just a mask? This is terrible. These guards will take off my head in an instant. He was trying to think fast. Meanwhile, people were leaving and cheering and great activity was going on, and then suddenly he was alone with the emperor and the daughter. Well, his shock and surprise lent to his movements a kind of simplicity that they interpreted as dignity and modesty. "Well, young man," said the emperor, "my daughter has chosen you. What do you think of that?" His mind was racing. "I really never expected to win, sire." Quickly, a plan. Behind the mask, his face was doing all kinds of things. "I know, haven't packed up my affairs. I've not really prepared for this yet." And then an idea. "It's really a responsible thing to marry a princess and become an emperor. I think I need to think it over for a while." The princess stared at him intently. Behind the mask, his forehead began to drip with sweat. What if the mask slipped and fell off? He didn't dare raise his hands up to touch it. Did she notice? And then she spoke. "Oh, I am so impressed with you," she said. "Any other man would have just jumped at this choice, but you are so responsible." "Really, I want to give you 12 months. I will wait for you. Then come back and give me your answer." Whew. So with much formality and thank yous, he was escorted to the palace door. "Let me go," he said. "North, south, east, anywhere, to the forest." No way. At the doors of the palace was this huge crowd of people cheering him, lifting him on their shoulders. He was famous. He was now the handsomest, noblest man in the whole land, and everybody looked up to him, watched him, wanted to be near him. His life changed. He had to be so careful that not one slight harsh word, not one mean action escaped from him, or he'd be found out, he'd be dead. He had to be so concentrated. And what's worse, he had to start acting with grace and kindness and nobility and generosity, and he'd had no practice at all. But gradually he worked his way into it. And initially he was so shocked at how easily people could be fooled. Even the princess, she was so trusting. Looking through the eye holes of the mask, he began to see something he'd never seen before. Faces full of love instead of fear. Kindness, honor, respect. It was amazing. And as time went on, he began to look forward to this. Made him feel so good. And then one day, when somebody asked him for his advice again, instead of just blurting out something, he actually paused for a moment or two and thought of what might help. Oh, it felt so good. So he did it more often and more often. He quite liked this new life. He was carrying it out well. But all the time he knew behind the mask who he really was, and he was careful. And then 12 months were up. and it was time to go back to the palace. He tried to think of some other devious way out, but you see, his mind had grown unaccustomed to working that way, and all he could think of doing was going back and telling her the truth. So he did. He went back to the palace, and he was welcomed and cheered, and he was escorted into her presence. And she waited for his answer. He fell to his knees. "Oh, Princess, I have deceived you so badly. I am not who you think. This face is a mask. I had it made to deceive you. I'm a robber and a thief and a scoundrel. I just wanted to get into the palace and rob some money. I haven't robbed anyone now for 12 months. You see, Princess, you really cannot judge people by appearances." She stared at him, silent, for a long time. And then she said, I have been fooled. But not by you, by my own pride. Oh, you really longer. I do ask you one thing, though. Would you take off your mask so I can see who you really are, and then you may go? Well, with trembling hands, he took hold of the mask, and in one move he lifted it up off his face and looked at her. She gasped. "What? Why did you have a mask made to look just like your real face?" What? He shook his head in disbelief. What was she talking about? He turned his head to find a mirror. It was true. There was that beautiful face. For a whole year, he had worked and tried so hard to live up to that image that his face had finally become like that. His face, like his heart, had become pure. So, of course, it ended as you might imagine. They married, and in time, that ex-thief became the noblest and greatest warrior that land had known.
And looked upon the people, and there fell a stillness upon them. And with a great voice he said, "When love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep. And when his wings enfold you, yield to him, though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you. And when he speaks to you, believe in him, though his voice may shatter your dreams as the north wind lays waste the garden. For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. Even as he is for your growth, so is he for your pruning. Even as he ascends to your height and caresses your tenderest branches that quiver in the sun, so shall he descend to your roots and shake them in their clinging to the earth. Like sheaves of corn, he gathers you unto himself. He threshes you to make you naked. He sifts you to free you from your husk. He grinds you to whiteness. He kneads you until you are pliant. And then he assigns you to his sacred fire, that you may become sacred bread for God's sacred feast. These things shall love do unto you, that you may know the secrets of your heart, and in that knowledge become a fragment of life's heart. But if in your fear you would seek only love's peace and love's pleasure, then it is better for you that you cover your nakedness and pass out of love's threshing floor into the seasonless world where you shall laugh, but not all of your laughter, and weep, but not all of your tears. Love gives naught but itself, and takes naught from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love. You should not say, God is in my heart, but rather, I am in the heart of God. And think not you can direct the course of love, for love, if it finds you worthy, directs your course. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. But if you love and must needs have desires, let these be your desires. To melt and be like a running brook that sings its melody to the night. To know the pain of too much tenderness. To be wounded by your own understanding of love. And to bleed willingly and joyfully. To wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving. To rest at the noon hour and meditate love's ecstasy. To return home at eventide with gratitude. And then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips.
Yeah. This is the cutting edge. Yo. Yes, this is cutting edge, and this is cutting edge, and I hear FM. That was the prophet, Khalil Gibran. You know, Khalil Gibran is a Lebanese poet, writer, who was banned from his country because of what he was saying, you know. Very famous. He was known for the prophet, actually. He might have had a book still, but his most famous was the prophet. So we present Khalil Gibran and also that story there a while ago. Hope he was listening to it. We're going to continue the program. This is the cutting edge, and this is the cutting edge on RFM coming through.